Hi everyone, this is Nia and today I'm going to make a very simple doodle. This is an opportunity for me to just mindlessly relax and play around with different color combinations. This time I want to play with some cool winter colors, and since there's no sketching needed for this, let's go straight to the colors. Firstly, this is Sepia by Holbein, Terre Verte by Holbein, Grey of Grey by Holbein, Indigo by Schmincke. I'm also going to use Bleedproof White by Dr. P.H. Martens, as well as my colored pencil. This is by Derwent Lightfast, Natural Brown. My waterproof pen, this is in the color black and it's by Snowman. And lastly, I'll also be using my Finetec Gold palette for extra shimmers. These are just my chosen mediums, but if you have access to others that you'd like to use to add extra textures or colors, feel free to do that as well. For this video, I'm going to leave everything in real time, but I will still be making cuts when my hand is off the frame because I find that it looks more satisfying that way. This is just a very quick doodle, but I want to make it as relaxing as possible for you guys if you want to make it your own or have this in the background as you're painting. So firstly, I'm just going to paint ovals horizontally. I'm not very good at spacing, but for this one, I don't really mind if the ovals are slightly off to the side, because I'm going to fix the spacing later as I doodle. This lessens the intimidation of sometimes starting to paint on a completely blank page, so don't worry about making everything too neat. When I'm painting the ovals, I'm not going to wait for each one to dry because I actually like the transition of colors as they travel across each other on the wet surface. And to maximize this visually, I find that it helps to either use different hues next to each other so there's a nice contrast, or play with the contrast of values so the darker values look more visible as the paint blooms towards the lighter ovals. Specifically with the colors that I've chosen, there are 2 light value and 2 dark value colors. The lighter values are the Terre Verte and Grey of Grey, and the darker are Sepia and Indigo. However, this doesn't mean that Indigo or Sepia could only produce dark values, because you can always use either a very thin consistency with lots of water to create a light transparent color with the Indigo or Sepia, or mix either one of them with some Grey of Grey to thicken the paint so it's a bit easier to control. Even if I only have 4 colors here, there are still a lot of possibilities for different color mixtures in order to fill the whole page, because you can use the colors as they are with different consistencies, or by mixing 2, 3, or all 4 colors with different ratios and different consistencies. So this is a time to experiment and play with different color combinations and different ratios in order for you to fill the whole page. Since the first line is a bit heavy towards the left, I decided to leave a small space in between and continue to the right, so I can somewhat nudge the last oval on the second line more towards the right hand side. Sometimes I like to also make the paint travel vertically instead of horizontally. So as an example, since the last couple of ovals were still a little bit damp, I'm just going to paint directly underneath them before painting the ones on the left side. If you want certain colors to travel across a bit more than what it's naturally doing, then while the surface is still wet, you can always pick the previous color again to help direct the paint to another oval. Or you can also take a bit more pigment from the previous color and just dot it in the new oval, so that oval can have multiple colors. Though I really love the color transitions here, I'm going to try to not overdo them, so I'm going to leave certain ovals just as a flat color. This is because I'm going to be doodling on top of them, If I want the painting to just be the ovals, I find that it'll be nice to have more wet on wet transitions. But since I want to draw and doodle on top of these ovals, I feel like a lot of the transitions might be hidden behind the doodles anyway. However, if you really like the ovals that you've created, you can also just not add as much doodles and drawings on top of your painting. But anyway, I'm just going to fill in the rest of the page. This doodle is very open to interpretation and it's just something to relax to. So I'm actually not going to voice over too much unless there is something or parts of my thought process I feel worth sharing. So I hope you guys enjoy the colors and the ovals coming together. Okay, I'm done with the ovals here and I want them to completely dry off before drawing anything on top or next to them so I don't accidentally smudge the colors. You can dry these off really quickly using a hairdryer. Before doodling on top of the ovals, I'm going to fill in the small spaces in between. And for these spaces, I'm going to use a medium to thick consistency of paint. Of course, you can use any color. And I'm going to paint some leaves using my size 0 brush since the spaces are quite small. As for the type and size of leaves, it will just depend on the space that I have. Once I'm done filling in the space, I'm going to start doodling on top of the ovals. I'm starting with bleed-proof white to paint on top of the darker ovals, or you can also use white pen so it's much easier to control. I personally love drawing and painting leaves, so I'm going to add those on top of the ovals, but I'm also going to pair this up with some shapes and patterns as well. By the way, if at any moment of your painting you want to paint on top of a certain colored oval, which might not pair well with the bleed-proof white or your white pen, feel free to switch between mediums. There are no set rules here. Just paint whatever you feel like in the moment and enjoy the process. After filling a few ovals with the white, I'm going to switch to my colored pencil. I'm just using a brown here, so I'm using it to outline. I just like the texture of the colored pencils. And by the way, you can use any colored pencils for these doodles or actually any of my paintings. I sometimes even just use hobby grade pencils. The medium really doesn't matter too much, so just use this time to experiment with what you have at home. Since my ovals are quite small, I find that my pencil sometimes isn't sharp enough to draw on certain details. So here I switch to my pen to doodle and draw on top of the light colored ovals. I feel like there are a lot of outlines at the moment, so I'm just going to reuse my watercolors to paint on top of the ovals as well. For these leaves, I'm going to make them a bit more bold by using darker values to contrast some of the delicate outlines. For this one at the bottom, I wanted to paint little horse chestnuts, which are basically just circles with some pointy tips, but sadly it turned out looking like 2020 instead. It's not very appealing whatsoever, so I ended up taking off the paint with some tissue, and I actually like the residual paint that it leaves. It kind of looks like a light stamp, so I'm going to reuse this technique to paint some light backgrounds before doodling on top of some of the ovals. Once I've made those stamp backgrounds, I'm going to doodle and paint on top of the ovals again, using a darker value so it stands out against the quite busy background now. You can also use a thick pen so the drawing or the doodle stands out more. I also realized I haven't added any gold, so I'm going to do that now. I find that the gold will look nice painted on top of some of the darker value ovals. And I also try to use a very thick consistency so it stands out from the background color. I don't really like how this oval is looking. I find that the background is a bit too messy. I tried to cover it up by painting something on top, but it made it look more busy. So I just covered it up using a thick consistency of indigo, and while the surface is still damp, I added a thick consistency of the gold. So the gold kind of just spreads out naturally to the darker blue. After looking at this again, I felt like some of the drawings with the really thin outlines look too delicate compared to everything else, and it's kind of like disappearing into the background. So I'm just going to paint the outlines instead using the colors that I already pre-mixed on my palette. I feel like I've painted enough here, but for some reason my hand was still itching to paint some more. Luckily I stopped myself before going way too far, and that's basically it for this doodle. I hope you find it relaxing to watch or paint along to. Like usual, the list of tools as well as my social media links will be in my description box. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe for more relaxing tutorials that I post every Friday. And if you're still here, thank you so much for watching till the end. I'll see you guys at the next one. Bye!